Um, I'm the executive director of the India Philanthropy Alliance, which is a coalition or a network of 24 of the largest and most respected Indian charities that have a legal entity, that have an organization in the United States that's focused on fundraising and constituency building. So that's, and we've been around. We were founded in 2018, uh, and we've been growing and ever since. So our the 24 organizations that are represented on our board are some of the most effective charities in India, in fact, in the world, working in sectors such as healthcare, education, livelihoods, elder care, environmental protection, um, animal rights. And so we're working to make all of them more effective, especially insofar as their ability to raise money in the United States and to mobilize volunteers and to really involve the Indian American diaspora, which is between 5 and 6 million people here. Many of them have experienced a lot of success. And we feel that if we can help engage those people who've had success in business here in the work of these great Indian charities, the scale of their work can be much greater. They can do more good. So we're really a kind of a capacity building organization and a constituency building organization for organizations that are part of our network. And you're probably familiar with some of them: Pratham, Akshay Patra, Magic Bus, AIF, and Cry. These are some of the organizations that are involved in us, and some that are less well known, like one that's based here in Bangalore, called Arogya World, which is working on diabetes prevention in India, and doing some incredible work. They're again not as well known as some of the others. So we're working to get more resources and more attention for these organizations in the United States, especially amongst the diaspora. Well, India Giving Day Live, which we did for the first time, is part of a 4-year-old campaign called India Giving Day. And so just India Giving Day, we were very pleased that we raised $5.6 million. And actually, if you take out the single largest donation from each of our 4 years, this year was our most successful year ever in terms of raising money. Last year, we had one $5 million donation, so it kind of skewed the results. But if you take out the largest single donation from each of our 4 years, this year was the most successful, where we raised $5.1 million. We directly supported more than 60 events around the country. I went to one that had almost 600 people in Maryland. And there were others that we didn't support that just happened spontaneously. There were probably 100 events that happened in just a 2 to 3 week period. So we felt very good, a lot of youth involvement. But in terms of India Giving Day Live, yeah, this was a first time experiment. Really we were setting out to learn about how to do this, because we'd never done it before. We felt it was quite successful for a first year. And yes, we did see the number of donations grow during that 3-hour period, and we saw a lot of engagement with young people, with committed volunteers, and with new people to these organizations. Several thousand people there were several thousand views just during that 3-hour period, and we expect that will grow as people watch the recording. But this is something absolutely is going to become a recurring part of India Giving Day in the future. Now I think we really understand how to put on a quality show and bring on the right kind of guests, and you can expect it to be just bigger and more successful next year, now that we've learned how to do it based on our pilot this year. We intentionally, you see, usually the big time for donations in the US to Indian causes are during uh, gala fundraising events in the spring and the fall, and during the end of year, which is the end of our tax season. So India Giving Day is we're raising money during a period of time where usually there's very little donations, and we're trying to create a third focus of giving, which during a time of year where giving is very unusual, especially for Indian charities. The India Development Fund, which received more donations and more dollars than ever before, was about, and Suvarna, maybe you can get the exact numbers. I don't have them handy, but I think it was ended up around $10,000. But we don't accept donations now. The India Giving Day is for a very particular 2-week period. We don't want to, people can give all year round to these great organizations, but India Giving Day is a very time limited exercise. And the reason why we put together the fund is the first year when we did this, you could give to the first year, I think we had 25 or 26 charities. This year we had 51. So it's obviously growing. But some people wanted to give maybe because, let's say, their nephew or niece or son or daughter or friend asked them to give, and they just wanted to give to be supportive, but they didn't want to have to spend time searching amongst all these charities. So they just wanted to give, and they say, we trust IPA to allocate this money to all the organizations based on need. And so it was a way to quickly get into and out of the site and make a donation without having to do a lot of research. So again, I think it was around $10,000 that went through that. So not most people actually came, they wanted to do the research. They had an organization in mind, but for those that didn't, and we can get you the number of donations that came to the fund. I don't have that handy, but it was around $10,000, a lot of small donations. And we think that will grow, but most people are actually excited to do the research, excited to pick their charity. And that's why most of the money didn't go through the fund. It went directly to these organizations, but we like to have that option. The two largest ones we got were both $500,000, 2 donations each for $500,000. And actually one of them was actually announced on India Giving Day Live. And so and if you watch it, you can see there was this guy named Mahesh Sai Reddy, and he's a board member of Pratham USA, and a very nice man. And he had been talking about making a donation for a couple of months with Manisha Bharti, the head of Pratham USA. But, he's a businessman, and philanthropy sometimes, you can put it off till tomorrow or till next week or next month. So we offered him the opportunity to announce his donation to inspire others. And when we offered that, he very quickly decided that he was going to make the donation, and he decided on the amount, which was, I think, larger than had been discussed previously. So, this is where India Giving Day, by giving people a platform to talk about their generosity, can move from a possible donation to an actual donation. And that his donation was tied for the largest in India Giving Day this year. Well, again, we feel very good about 5.6 million. And again, I said, if you take out the largest donation, it was over 5 million. So again, in that sense, it was our biggest year ever. Biggest year for events. So when, I told you about this event in Maryland where 550, 600 people came. So where people are coming together to discuss philanthropy. That event was focused on a group called Ek Kadam Aur, which is around childhood blindness. And again, not a very big organization, but they had a very big event. So we had a record number of events associated with India Giving Day. I think the other thing that it's not as easy to measure, but one of the things we're trying to do is not just talk about the amount of giving, but the quality of giving. And we're trying to hold up some of the people who are giving really thoughtfully, are giving in a way that they want to have the biggest impact with their donation. And this is where our national co-chairs of India Giving Day are kind of role models for philanthropy. So a lot of the events we had, and also to some degree India Giving Day Live, we were talking about not just the quantity of giving, but the quality of giving. And I think that 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 message got through more clearly than any of our previous campaigns. And the other thing we tried to get through clearly is that giving should be something you don't put off to when you're 60 or 70 or 80 years old. We've really tried to involve young people, people in high school, middle school, college, young professionals. We had a whole panel during India Giving Day Live of young people who've wrote award-winning essays in our national youth essay competition, which is now we're in our 7th year of having that essay competition. Maybe Suvarna can send you some information about that. So we wanted to drive home that philanthropy should be youth friendly, and that you can give anytime at any phase of life, and it all matters. And also that the quality of giving is as important as the amount of giving. And I think we did better in those areas than we've ever done before. I mean, I think, the future of it is, we think that we, again, really doubling down on the quality of giving, doubling down on youth, doubling down on India Giving Day Live, on these events online and in person. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if young people don't embrace philanthropy, and if young people don't embrace philanthropy to India, this could we could be, this could be kind of a shrinking market, not a growing market, because so one of the things we're trying to do is connect Indian American young people to the country where their parents or grandparents or great grandparents immigrated from. And some of that happens naturally. Some of it happens over time. My college roommate is the son of an Indian doctor who immigrated to the U.S. In the 60s. And when I met him in college, he was, very Americanized, really was not much in touch with his Indian heritage. But with each passing decade, he has become more in touch with his Indian heritage, more in touch with, Indian spiritual traditions, spends more time in India. But we're trying to kind of speed that process up. And so that young people, many of whom are going in to have very successful careers in finance and technology and hospitality and medicine and academia, to have them, deepen their connection to India and deepen their connection to philanthropy as part of their, connection to India. And that's where, our youth essay competition has an important role. We're going to be having a summit in September in Dallas, our India Philanthropy Summit, and we're going to be involving young people. We're going to be having a parallel event at the University of Texas at Dallas, involving college students there, many of whom are Indian or Indian American. So yeah, this emphasis on youth is not going away. It's really an integral part. We saw a lot of the events this year, these 60 events that we supported and dozens others that we weren't directly involved in. A lot of them had a very strong youth element, were youth-led in some cases. And this is going to continue. It's the only way we're going to be growing this market, and we're committed to that because, again, Indian charities are, I've run organizations that were active in Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, Southeast Asia, China, and Indian charities are some of the very best in the world, and so they deserve just much more support. And by engaging young people and by talking about the quality of giving as they begin to embrace philanthropy, I think that we're going to be seeing more and better giving by this generation than any other generation in history. I mean, it's more of an art than a science. I think that we try to have a range of people, a mixture of ages and genders and what part of the country people come from, and whether they're, some people are more products of the 20th century, like me. Simi Shah is more of a product of the 21st century, very savvy with technology. So we like to have a nice mixture. And then I think whoever we have, whether it's, Vijay Amritraj, I'm with him here at a conference. I just actually walked by him in the lobby as on my way to my room to talk to you, or whether it's younger people, philanthropy is a very personal activity. So I didn't want to have it be a very intellectual process of, of how do you do randomized controlled trials to measure the impact of giving. That's an important discussion, but before you get there, I think it's important. Why give? Um, and how does it make your life better? And that was a recurring theme. One of my teachers, a guy by the name of Pradeep Kashyap, we call him Cash. He was one of the founders of the American India Foundation, and he said, "We want to create a kind of a culture where you haven't really led a truly successful life until you've not only made money in business, but you figured out how to give it away in an effective manner. Like that's the final step of what it is to be successful." And so we, and we just try to underline how satisfying and joyful it can be to give, not as an afterthought, not because you feel guilty, not because people manipulate you, but because you want to improve your society, and you want to improve whether it's your local neighborhood or you want to improve some part of India that means you're connected to. And so by people each telling their personal story, I think that the overall narrative is that to have a happy, joyful, successful life, philanthropy needs to be part of it. And these people we brought up, who are all very successful in their own fields, that each one had a unique story, but what brought them together was how philanthropy is just a very important part of their life, and making their life meaningful, and trying to get that message through. And we think that again, we saw the donations rise. We saw a lot of good feedback, comments online, and I'm sure we planted a lot of seeds where young people said, "Wow, I never really thought about giving. I thought it was just something you do because you joined a club. I'm in high school, or somebody who made a lot of money in Silicon Valley and just saying, oh, I thought you give because you know because it makes you look like less greedy." And then they like people saying, wow, maybe there are other reasons to do this. And that was the point we were trying to get across, by just not over intellectualizing giving, but talking about how it's a very personal experience. And for many of us, a very meaningful experience. When people ask, gosh, Alex, you're not Indian. Why are you so focused on India? And well, there are a lot of reasons. But one of them is when I was in high school, I saw the movie Gandhi by Richard Attenborough, and it just touched something very deeply inside me. And I just his notion of service, of seva, was it just so impacted me. And I from that moment on, I wanted my life to be of service, and I've been working, really across my career now almost 40 years, and it's been focused on service. And because I heard a story that inspired me about a great man named Mahatma Gandhi, and so now I think there are lots of people around the country in the U.S. who saw the live stream, and hopefully it planted a seed with them, like that movie planted with me, that changed my life, changed what I thought of as kind of the purpose of my life. I do think there are some people who give. We had around 100 peer-to-peer fundraisers, and these were people. I was one of them, but most of them were young people, and they set up a fundraising page, and they go to their their brothers and sisters and aunties and teachers and librarians and community leaders, and several of them got close to 100 donations in 2 weeks. Last year, we had one young lady who got 170 donations in 2 weeks. And yes, some of them may have just been people wanted to encourage that young person, and they won't necessarily become long-term donors to that organization, but I mean, some of them might. But I think this tradition is really growing. That it's starting conversations about what role in your life does philanthropy play, and whether it's these 60 plus events, whether it's the 2,000 people, 2,000 individual unique donors, many of whom made multiple donations. Like I made 10 donations, I think, that day. Um, I think that it spans the gamut between people who've been giving to that organization for 10 years, and this is just the latest of a long line of donations. But, more than 1,000 donations that were made. It was the first time that the donor gave to that organization. And we're going to be working with these organizations to help ensure that a lot of them end up being renewed and it becomes a long-term relationship. Now that takes work on the part of these charities, and we're going to try to give them a playbook and some techniques to do that. But it's hard to characterize 2,000 unique donors, almost 2,300 unique donors. But I think a lot of them are long-term. Some of them are new, and we hope all of them continue. And we're going to do everything we can to earn their trust. And we salute the fundraisers, the ones who did the recruitment, because donor acquisition in the U.S. is very expensive. To get a new donor, a lot of times people maybe buy a mailing list of like 100,000 people to get 50 new donors, and they have to pay a lot for that mailing list. And here we have 1,000 new donors that were generated just in this campaign over a 2-week period for these organizations. So on average, 20 per organization, but some of them got much more. And that's because there were a lot of volunteers out there, raising money for these organizations. We set the technology up to help them do that. We think a lot of we think this is going to become more and more of an annual tradition, and the volunteers out there are going to help us do that. But we have to earn it. We have to work for it, and we will. Over several decades, organizations that I've led have raised more than $300 million. So, I know a fair amount about fundraising, and so do some of my colleagues. Meenakshi Mahajan, who's my deputy director, was raising money for Magic Bus USA, and we're trying to. I've actually formed a network of fundraising consultants called the India Philanthropy Advisors Network, and we're trying to teach these organizations to kind of upgrade their fundraising skills. And it's, I hold a monthly webinar where I teach about, good fundraising practices. And, we get, 30, 40 people for each of these sessions. And then more, we record it so people can view it afterwards. So, the story of how good Indian charities are, it just hasn't been told enough, nor has the story of how philanthropy can improve your life as a donor, make it more meaningful. So we're just going to keep hammering at those messages year after year, and that consistency. One of my mentors had a saying. He says that repetition is reputation. And so you can't, if you just tell something once, people forget. But you tell them over and over in different ways, and it'll get through. And so the thing we're working on right now is our youth essay competition, which is engaging high school and middle school students in philanthropy. But we're involving a lot of, people that are older as judges in that competition. We're then going to announce the winners at our summit in Dallas in September. So, one of the things is India Giving Day is more and more becoming a year-round activity. The focus is 2 weeks giving, but we're trying to upgrade skills and tell these two important stories of how good Indian charities are, the best of them, and there are dozens, hundreds of really good charities, and how giving can benefit the donor. And we're gonna keep putting those messages out there, and we see behavior turning. We see the diaspora giving more in general, both to India and to local causes. That was the Dahlberg report that we commissioned, showed that during the years we've been doing India Giving Day from 2018, which was a little bit before we started the India Giving Day until now, the giving of the Indian American diaspora has more than tripled, according to this survey. The one done in 2018 and then another done in 2024 giving, and Suvarna can send you that. So what we're doing is working. The giving is growing. But there's a lot more growth, and yes, we're going to be upgrading skills, bringing that consistency, and doing activities all year round. I went to this event in Germantown, Maryland, about 600 people, and you could just see the whole Indian community of of kind of Maryland coming together, and it was a really a social occasion, multi-generational. You had you had very young people, 5, 6 years old. You had people in wheelchairs, and it just you could see how philanthropy and this one organization that works on blindness, helping blind children, mainstreaming them, Akadamor. Again, one of the smallest organizations in India Giving Day, but really one that I've come to love. And you just see that in the social fabric of the Indian community here in Maryland, that philanthropy was becoming a big part of it. And this was probably when I talked to people, they said this is one of the biggest gatherings of the community in Maryland, in the whole year. And it was around, people enjoyed each other's company, and there was good food and great music, Indian kind of classical Indian music being performed by great performers. But it was all about how do you 320,000 Indian children are blind and are not in any form of schooling, school age kids. And the recurring theme of this event was how do you get that number down to zero? How do you have all the blind children in India, 320,000 of them who aren't in school? How do you get them all into school? And this organization has a great strategy and a plan, and they're making progress on that, but they just need more money to do more. So yeah, giving becoming part of the fabric of the community, integrated into a large community event. And there were events all around the country. This is just the one I went to, and it was one of the biggest. So that really stood out. This was really becoming an important part of just the community, how it functions, how they celebrate, how they gather, and I want to see a lot more of that. Yeah, so you ask a couple questions. They're all good ones. I think the Indian government has done a lot of good in terms of supporting Indian charities. The CSR law, which has now been around for more than 10 years, is an important source of funding for a lot of the organizations part of India Giving Day. So the India government has an important role. We don't really seek any formal endorsement from the government, but one of our philanthropy summits when we were starting India Giving Day was held at the Indian consulate in New York. Another one was held at the Indian consulate in San Francisco, the one last October on Gandhi Jayanti. So obviously the government is supportive. The consul generals, have addressed our meetings where we gather and talk about India Giving Day. So we appreciate that very much. That support. And yes, we've had discussions with some of the Indian diaspora, especially in the UK, about them taking on India Giving Day. It hasn't materialized yet, but I think it will. And a guy named M.R. Rangaswamy, may know, the head of in diaspora, is kind of using some of his relationships in the UK. So I think that will probably happen in the next couple of years. We're looking forward to that. There are also some, local campaigns in India that we have a ton of respect for. There's Dasra Philanthropy Week. There's the Joy of Giving Week, which got rebranded as Dan Uchab. And so these are local campaigns for around philanthropy that happen in India, and we're very supportive of them. And if someone wants to start India Giving Day in India, we would welcome that. But there are also existing campaigns around philanthropy that we also want to support and empower. But yeah, we have global ambitions, and we have global interest. But the U.S. is still a big market. 5-6 million of the total diaspora of 35 million are here, some of the most successful ones, and we think there are billions of dollars that can be generated more, and that it can be used better if and it can involve the younger generation. So we've got a lot to do in the next 3 to 5 years here, but we do have global ambitions and global partners that are coming forward.